Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, this time going way back to March 13th, 1998, as we cover Symphony X's Twilight in Olympus. But before we talk about this forgotten Symphony X classic, how are you, my friend?
Very good, very good. I'm looking forward to this discussion, and just another one of those albums that you would have guessed, I don't know, we would have talked about a while ago, but I guess as far as Symphony X goes, there are at least two albums that we prioritized over this one, but this seemed like the next clear-cut choice, at least for me, to talk about, just because I feel like it, as I mentioned last week, it kind of, I think it doesn't get as much love as the album before it and the album after it, and I think it deserves a little more attention, so we shall give it that.
Yes, and I would say that the albums that come before the trilogy are a little raw, a little less polished, and the albums that would come after this trilogy begin to really start taking a little bit of a different direction in certain regards. And certainly, I think many older fans would say that the band changed direction considerably after the new Mythology suite. But before we talk all things Symphony X, just a couple of things I wanted to mention up front. I was really pleasantly surprised this morning when I woke up to a new Crown song. The song is called The Timing Is Right. It's coming from their new album Wonderland, which is due out August 22nd. And I should note, there's a lot of stuff coming out in August and September of this year. It is going to be a massive undertaking to get through all that stuff. But no album is much higher on my list than the new Crown album. These guys are just so markedly consistent. It's always intriguing to me when they put out new stuff. It's not like they reinvent the wheel, but the wheel they have is so good that it almost doesn't matter. I'm curious what your thoughts are of this song, and if you had a chance to listen to it.
I love it, and I've yet to hear a song by this band that I don't love. So the streak continues, and this is easily one of my most anticipated albums of the year, and it comes a week before the new Halloween. So at least those two heavy hitters for both of us are going to be released right before Prague Power, so we'll need to get ourselves prepared before we head off into the sunset that is Atlanta in early September. But yeah, bodes well. This was pretty much the only thing I had on my list to discuss, honestly, outside of our album. But yeah, I'm excited, and yeah, other than that, I really all I've really listened to is that single, the Symphony X album, and I've gone back and listened to the new Halloween album again, and continue to let that marinate. I'll be very much ready to discuss in depth when closer to the release date. But again, I appreciate RPM for getting it to us early. Apparently they did a listening party in like April, so the album seems to have been pretty much done for quite a bit now. I'm sure that the release date probably was strategized by the label for whatever reason, but it's interesting. I did also found the list of who wrote each track, so that sometimes gives away a lot of about the song, knowing who was behind it. I actually called a couple of them just because like some of the Kai stuff sounded like it was a page out of the Gamma Ray playbook, and there was one song that was like just characteristically wikey. So I after two listens, I'm not sure that this is going to compete with the previous album for me, but I will continue to listen to it over the next, I don't know, 7 or so weeks before it actually is released officially. But again, it's exciting. But I think anything less than album of the year is a disappointment when it comes to just how good the last Halloween album was. So we'll see. Still too early to say.
Some stiff competition, though, with so many bands coming out with albums over the next 6 months. I'm almost curious. I'm not going to ask, but do you have like a front runner at this point for what's your album of the first half of the year?
I think there's like 2 or 3 or even 4 that are kind of floating at the top that I've just gone back to and have really enjoyed. It's probably not a huge, stretch as to what those albums are, but there's some stuff. Not to mention one of the albums is sung by the singer from Crown, so we might be getting double duty on the list later this year. We shall see, but just a lot. There's been a lot of good stuff so far, and I listened to your latest playlist actually today as well, and I'll be sure to update Spotify with that. It was nice to hear. I'm not going to name everything, but it's always nice to hear the vocals of one Ray Alder. There was a track that you had selected from the second A to Z album. I believe the track was "This Chaotic Symphony," and it's just always nice. Like, you're off, you're doing your work, you're having yourself a day, and then all of a sudden you hear that voice, and it's just one of those voices that just like breaks through all the monotony of everyday life. And just one of my all-time favorite vocalists. I know it hasn't been that long since we've discussed an album Ray appeared on, but that was a nice surprise. I'll have to give the rest of that album a listen, as I enjoyed the first one quite a bit. But we keep dropping these playlists pretty often, so keep an eye out on our Spotify page. Just head over to metalexchangepodcast.com, and the playlist link is on the top of the screen, and it'll take you right to it, and you can find all of our more. It tends to be focused more on recent stuff, but we like to throw in some oldies every now and again for fun. So that's there for those who are interested.
Yeah, well said. I feel like Ray Alder's voice is like fried chicken or some other comfort food. It just always hits home whenever you hear it. There were two other albums I just wanted to mention before we got to the matter at hand. And these two albums could not be any different. I'm going to start with a prog rock album, an album by a band called Presto Ballet. I don't know have you ever heard of these guys, or is this like the first time you're hearing the name Presto Ballet?
No, is it like half Rush, half ballet, or
something like that? It's a we talked about Dragon Lord last week and how you had Eric Peterson from Testament doing black metal. Well, this is the exact opposite. This is Metal Church guitarist Kurt Vanderhoof doing progressive rock. So like you go from another thrashy band to just a completely opposite style. And this band has been around for quite some time. They've put out albums consistently since 2005, but their new album Dreammentia came out a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. It's got that keyboard sound that when you hear it, it screams like 70s prog rock, but the songs were rather catchy, and I think that it's something that a lot of people will enjoy if they want something a little bit different. And it was just good to hear new music from them. It had been about 7 years since their last release, The Days Between, which came out in 2018. So new music from Presto Ballet. And on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, I think I have a front runner for my death metal album of the year. I don't listen to a ton of death metal, but when I heard this album, I was immediately blown away. And this is a band called Ceremony. They're a Dutch band on an independent label, so they kind of self-financed this release from what I understand, and the album is called Solitary Bleed. And they're Dutch, but think of Epica, just slightly heavier with no Simone on vocals, and that's what this is. It's really great symphonic death metal. I think that there's even a chance that some of these tracks you would enjoy just because there is a chock full of melody on these songs. So I'll post one of their tracks this week so people can give that a listen. It's an album that I think if more people heard that they would definitely enjoy. And I have no doubt that at some point in the near future, these guys will get picked up by a major label because there's just too much talent in this band not to, and the songwriting is really good too. So those are my two plugs for the week. I just wanted to add those. And now we can talk about some Symphony X. As you mentioned, we talked about The Divine Wings of Tragedy. We've talked about 5, the new Mythology Suite. And sandwiched in the middle coming out March 13th of 1998, was this album Twilight and Olympus. And it's kind of funny because as I look back, I feel like this album just does not get talked about nearly as much as those other two albums. And it's odd because, as you mentioned kind of as part of a segue last week, if I'm not mistaken, this one actually saw a domestic release and was a little bit easier to obtain than The Divine Wings of Tragedy, which came before it. So it's always surprising to me because this album was just more available, I think, than some of the other stuff that had come before it. What made you choose them this week, and what was kind of the catalyst for the decision?
I think it was just a matter of this was in my list of many albums that I wanted to talk about at some point, but then I went back into our spreadsheet and realized that the last time we talked about an album from this band was in August of 2023 when we talked about Divine Wings of Tragedy, and when we talked about that was after waiting since March 2021 when we talked about the new Mythology suite. So we have really spaced out our Symphony X choices, although for a band that's been around since the early 90s, they don't have a ton of albums. Their last album came out 10 years ago. Interesting fact, you have yet to choose a Symphony X album, so I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on that one. I between them and Dream Theater, I feel like you're lagging behind in a way that I wasn't expecting when this podcast began. But this was I remember getting this album, and I can't remember 100% if this was an album that was domestically released or not immediately. I just remember Divine Wings was a hard to find album. That for sure was not released in the US right off the bat. Twilight and Olympus may or may not have been. I don't remember. I tried looking it up. I couldn't find anything definitive on it, but I do remember owning that and Divine Wings prior to leaving for college in 2000. And I remember having those two albums were the two Symphony X albums I had. And then I went back and got Damnation Game, I think at Prague Power 3 from one of the vendors for like $10 or whatever to fill out the collection some more. And then probably got New Mythology Suite around the time it was released. I think I also got the Odyssey at that same Prague Power as well, just filling in some of the newer blanks at the time. So I remember our mutual friend Mike had this album and liked it a lot. He always would especially point to Orion the Hunter as one of his favorite songs on the album. And I can even go back in time looking at one of my old playlists from around this time, and Smoke and Mirrors was one of the tracks on it from a mix that I made in 2000. So clearly I had this album around that time. Out of the Ashes is on the second. I remember making two tapes. I had so much stuff at that time. I made two tapes worth, and the first tape had Smoke and Mirrors. The second tape had Out of the Ashes. So I was getting into Symphony X right around that time, because I don't have them on any of previous playlists or mixtapes. So that would have been around that time. So obviously it made an impression on me, and it's like an album that I don't really remember going back to a ton, but then I would, and I'd be like, holy crap, like how do I keep forgetting about this album? And I guess it's okay, because clearly the band has forgotten about it as well, because they don't tend to play anything from it, especially in recent years, which is a shame, because there's such a lot of good stuff on here. But man, the couple of tracks that we'll get to, I forgot about how good they are. So yeah, like this was kind of a no-brainer eventually, and I have this ongoing list of albums that I just keep adding stuff to, and because I am going to be unavailable the rest of the week, I wanted to do something that wouldn't involve like a whole week's worth of prep, and this really, for me, only required a couple of listens, and then And so there were a couple of tracks that I actually had to go back to and listen to a couple more times just because I didn't really remember them quite as well as I thought I might have. So that being said, what was how did you feel about this album when it came out? What are your memories of it? And how did you feel you were going to think about it, before you listened to it again? And did that change as you reacquainted yourself with it?
I always had fond memories of this album. I always thought it was a little underrated when compared to the other albums that came before it and after it, immediately before it and after it. But at the same time, when I was seeing this band live, seemingly on like a monthly basis, and I'm exaggerating a little, but I saw them a lot, they did play quite a few songs from this album. And so I have such fond memories of seeing it live and things like that. I always thought it was a little unbalanced. I always thought that the first half of the album was phenomenal, 10 out of 10. I always thought that the second half was something less than perfect. Not bad, just not as good as the top half. And I still think that that might be the case. But to say that the album on the whole is not good, or that the songs on the back half are not good, is a gross overstatement. This is a fantastic album. And I don't know that it gets the love that it otherwise should. And I have zero clue as to why the band has basically chosen not to play anything from this album in a live setting, at least in 2025. The only thing I could think of is that the band either can't pull it off live, or that Russell Allen maybe can't sing some of this stuff live as he's gotten older. Again, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just throwing out there as one possible explanation because it really doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the entirety of their set lists in recent, years, it seems that they're skewing more towards the newer material anyway. So, like, I feel like if they're gonna throw a bone to the old fans, it's usually in the form of tracks from Divine Wings of Tragedy. Typically, I think Evolution, the Grand Design, is from New Mythology Suite. I think they played that last year when they were on tour. And then I guess like it's really the bulk of things tend to come from, Paradise Lost, Iconoclast, and Underworld. I think they throw a bone to Inferno from the Odyssey here and there. But I mean, typically the songs they pick from the older, the first half of the catalog are typically the same. Like they don't really kind of rotate them. I mean, the first two albums I don't think get anything, which is actually kind of a shame because like Damnation Game has some good material on it. It's not quite, I think, like from a production standpoint, as quite as good as the following two albums. But there's A Winter's Dream and the title track and Dress to Kill. There's some really good tracks on there. The first album, I got to be honest with you, man, I do not know anything from this album except for Masquerade because the band re-recorded it, and we'll talk about that towards the end here. But I went back and listened to the original version of Masquerade, and it's incredible how like raw and different the band sounds with Rod Tyler doing the vocals instead of Russell Allen, who would join the band on the following album. So it's an interesting an interesting journey that this band has been on. But getting back to your comment about the live material, yeah, like there's some stuff on here. I mean, I feel like a song like Out of the Ashes or Smoke and Mirrors is just they're such blistering songs. Like maybe they just don't want to have to play that night in and night out because it's probably not easy to pull off both instrumentally and vocally. But man, I hope that when we see the band at Prague Power that they throw the old time Prague Power fans a bone and play at least something from this album. I would be psyched to hear anything. I believe it or not, but I'll just tell a quick little anecdote. When I was listening to this album earlier, Church of the Machine, which is the second track on the album, came on, And I don't know if you've ever done this, but do you ever just like picture in your head like what it would be like to hear a song live? And as I was like listening to the song and thinking about it, I like goosebumps up and down my arms. Like just the idea of them. And this is going to lead into something that we're going to do later this month, but like there's a set list that this band could play that I would not miss for anything in the world. I would be so excited to see it. I would be so amped up for it. And so like, for that reason, like I'm just not that excited about seeing the band at Prague Power, knowing, what they tend to stick to when it comes to their live show. And we've talked about it in the past, like they did bust out, Divine Wings of Tragedy, the entire song, the last time they played at Prague Power. So I imagine they'll probably have something up their sleeve for the diehards. But man, like I gotta tell you, like for me, the vast majority of tracks I would want to hear live from this band are from like, 1995 through like 2002 probably. There's probably some stuff on the Odyssey I'd like to hear. And there's definitely songs I enjoy on the last 3-4 albums. It's just on a whole, I don't find them to be all that, they don't really stick out too much from one another. There's stuff I really like. I'm not going to say that there's not, but I mean, there's just like, it's the difference between a bunch of albums that are all in that 9 area versus albums that are probably closer to like, 7.5 to 8. So like,
which is still very good. It's just not all-time classic material, I guess.
Right. Exactly.
Well, this is going to be interesting, and I guess we can just kind of give away what you kind of alluded to earlier, is that for one of our Patreon bonus episodes, and we'll do it later this month, we're going to create the Dream Symphony X set list, which I have a feeling are going to be quite different for the both of us, but I'm still very curious to see it. I think it'll make for a very interesting discussion as we cover this album, because I have no doubt that some of the material on this album will be featured in both of our set lists. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, this is something we've only done, I think, for Sabotage thus far, but I think with the headline show coming up at Prague Power, I think that it's good timing, and I have a feeling there's going to definitely be some overlap, and I also have a feeling that there's going to be very little overlap when the band actually performs. But I mean, like that, also these albums really were like in our formative years as metal fans, so we hold them in a high regard also for that reason. So I think that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to doing that, and I have a feeling that it's going to get me pretty amped up for their set, regardless of what it is they end up playing.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And just to kind of fill out the lineup here before we get into the album, Russell Allen on vocals, Michael Romeo on guitars, Michael Pinella on keyboards. All three are still in the band to this day. Twilight and Olympus also features Thomas Walling on drums and Thomas Miller on bass. So, 60% of the lineup is the same here. But this was like a real trip down memory lane. It had been quite some time since I listened to this album, but it holds up really well, and the production is very, very good. I mean, surprisingly good for the late 90s. But with that backdrop, I say we get into it, shall we?
Yeah, before that, just a couple of notes on the personnel. Thomas Walling was filling in for Jason Rulo, who temporarily left the band for personal reasons. He would be back for the next album. And this was Thomas Miller's last album with the band. He left during the Twilight and Olympus tour, and he would be replaced by Mike LaPond, who continues to be the band's bassist to this day. So their current lineup has been intact for 25 years at this point, which is rather impressive. But we're going through some changes, at least at this time, temporary or otherwise. But yeah, very, very well said. This is going to be interesting. It starts off, and you had mentioned this earlier, but that Smoke and Mirrors intro, the first track on this album, if there was any doubt in anybody's mind whether the Divine Wings was going to be like the high watermark for the band, Smoke and Mirrors may put that into a debate in and of itself, just because of how good this particular track is to start
the next album. There's no frills on this. It goes right into that neoclassical guitar style, which jumps out immediately. And they don't do that neoclassical style as much on the future releases. You get tastes of it, but not quite like this. I love Russell Allen's vocals, especially during that first verse of Smoke and Mirrors. And again, it goes back to me kind of wondering whether or not he can even sing like that anymore, just because, Father Time does no jobs, especially to one's vocal cords. The verses on Smoke and Mirrors may be the best on the entire album, and I like how the pre-chorus kind of just slows down a little bit, and then all of a sudden you got that upbeat chorus with an amazing tempo, and the instrumental section gives everyone just a chance to breathe. Every instrument gets a chance to shine, and I forgot how awesome this song was. Not that I didn't know how Smoke and Mirrors was a good song. I knew it, but I just forgot like how wonderful it is. And I'm not even going to let you talk. I'm actually going to make it my song of the week right out of the gate. I thought that this song just blew me away. It's not my favorite on the album, but this week, this hit all the right notes for me. So let's give Smoke and Mirrors a listen, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this opening track.
Spinning as we watch and wait on mystery to us all. On the edge of sanity, we tread the seas of destiny. Forever bound, silent forces call. The night falls, I've seen 1,000 moons rising in the sky. The night calls, I feel the midnight slowly close my eyes. Touched by the kiss of the sunrise. Live with shadows and fears behind smoking mirrors. Try to turn back the years. Living inside smoking
That was Smoke and Mirrors by Symphony X. How good is that song?
It's my favorite Symphony X song of all time. Bar
none.
Yeah, I just at the end of the day, Divine Wings of Tragedy is probably a better album than Twilight and Olympus, but this song is better than anything on Divine Wings of Tragedy for me. I just love this song so much. I think that it takes what makes Out of the Ashes such a fantastic song and improves on it somehow. The keys just absolutely, I think, carry the song with the Castlevania-esque, keyboards kind of just leading the way. Romeo's guitar work, like just everything going on here, and even a shout out to Thomas Walling, who passed away, by the way, unfortunately, a couple of years back. But shout out to him. He does not get left behind. He was up to the task of drumming like a fiend, and this song is definitely showing that. Just an outstanding song that I remember the first time I put this disc in and heard the song, and I was like, holy shit, like this is going to be quite a journey. And in all honesty, like the album, as good as it is, I don't think it ever recovers from this being the opening track. It just opens up with such like aplomb and like just like absolute like glorious chaos, neoclassical genius. This is why I miss like the old Symphony X sound, and why I would die to hear this song live. If they played this song live at Prague Power and it was the last song, and they played everything else was from Iconoclast for an hour and 45 minutes, I would stay and wait to hear Smoke and Mirrors. It would be worth it for me, and I wouldn't even complain. That's how much I love the song. But just to change things up, there's so many good songs on this album. I'll pick something else for Song of the Week. Just to not be redundant. But yeah, like I'm glad you chose this. I'm not at all surprised. It's an outstanding song. And even just the way that it ends in just such a like dramatic and awesome way. It's so interesting. Like when you think about how many songs just kind of do the fade, and this song is just like, nah, we're just gonna like bash all our instruments and at the end of a live, at the end of like an encore, you know, and just be like, oh, and by the way, that was the first goddamn song.
Yeah, how do you recover? But you know what? They do a nice job with Church of the Machine. This was a song they often played live back in the day. And what's interesting to me is, and I want to be clear, I forgot how long this song is. And when I say long, it clocks in at almost 9 minutes, but it doesn't feel 9 minutes long. And maybe that's why I forgot how long it is, because it feels like 4 minutes. This is a 90s prog metal classic. And it's interesting how it starts off with the chorus. I always thought that was like really, really cool. It's just different than anything you were hearing from prog metal bands at the time. But the keyboards on this song are dynamic and interesting, and they stand out almost like the Accolade does in terms of the keyboards on that song. And I'm there for it. Two of my favorite Symphony X songs. This one has just a majestic quality to it that I love. And I think that the riffs that Romeo employs, in addition to the solos, are just top notch. I think more than anything, though, what is something I want to say is that Russell Allen sounds great on this album and on this track. And when he sings in that higher register, it makes the angry Russell vocals sound that much better, because it's not the whole song. He's selectively doing it and going in and out of both vocal styles. Using that sound sparingly, I love. Using it to dominate 90% of the album is where I fall out of love with some of the newer Symphony X stuff. It was refreshing to hear this track again, though. I'm a huge fan of it.
Same. It's the perfect track to follow Smoke and Mirrors, because it slows things down. I thought the Accolade was an excellent comparison. It reminds me a lot of the more mid-tempo stuff from Divine Wings. And this, I think, is right up there with some of the best of the mid-tempo Symphony X songs from this era. I remember getting the Live on the Edge of Forever album when it came out in 2001. Still wish that they had made a DVD, because that set list is out of control, because it was right after New Mythology Suite was released. And so you had these three heavy hitter albums as their most recent releases that they could draw from for their set list. And this track was on there, and man, it comes across really great live. What a great live track. But yeah, like you said, it starts out really unassuming, and then out of nowhere the chorus comes in before any of the verses. It's a great then you get like a solo. It's like the song was it's like randomized. But man, like you said, it's a pretty long track, but it never like loses its luster, and it stays interesting throughout. And I absolutely love this song, and this could have been another Song of the Week candidate for me, honestly. But geez, they really front loaded this album with these first two songs in particular. Wow, two absolutely great songs that are really different from one another.
Yeah, and because they're different, I think they both stand out. And then they go to Sonata, which is like this minute and 25-second interlude, which is really just kind of the second movement of Beethoven's Sonata number 8, and kind of serves as a prequel, I guess, in many ways, to In the Dragon's Den, which is the fourth track on the album. This was one of the tracks I forgot a little bit about. Not that I didn't remember it, but I forgot how awesome this song was. I'd argue that In the Dragon's Den is the most underrated track on the entire album. What are your thoughts on this?
I will say, I just wanted to mention about Sonata. I thought that there's just this really cool, the way that Romeo's guitar almost kind of feels like it's being played at, from a distance. It has almost kind of like an echoey, almost
dissonance to it.
Yeah, and if you look at the album art, which is in some Roman or Greek Colosseum or whatever, it sounds like there's someone playing guitar by themselves, and it's echoing in this vast classic piece of architecture or whatever. And it really makes for a nice little interlude in between Church of the Machine and In the Dragon's Den, which brings back that fire that we got from Smoke and Mirrors, where it's just a fast paced banger of a Symphony X track. And I'm gonna make this one my song of the week, because I think that it's up there with some of the great Symphony X like face melter songs, like Out of the Ashes and Smoke and Mirrors. Fool's Paradise for me, I believe, was my track of the week from the new Mythology suite. I have that up there too as one of my favorite tracks by this band. But this is another great song that I kind of forgot about, probably because of those first two tracks that just get all the love and attention. They were also both on that Live on the Edge of Forever live album. This is another absolute banger of a track that has everything that you would love about a fast-paced Symphony X track. So we'll give this one a listen, and then we'll start to talk about the rest of the album, and see where it goes from here. Because I think, like we both mentioned earlier, like this really is a heavily front-loaded album, or at least it feels like it, with these three main tracks. I'm not counting Sonata in there because it's kind of like an interlude, but these first three full-length songs are really heavy hitters, and this one's, talk about Church of the Machine was like 8.5 minutes long. This is just shy of 4 minutes, and just like, this is one of those get in, get out, and like it leaves you wanting more, honestly, by the time it's over. So here's In the Dragon's Den from Symphony X's Twilight in Olympus.
Ashes on the floor, hypnotic array of lights, dragons falling throughout the night, omen in black, chained down to the rack, the end never inside, soaring through an endless flight. Through the nights and days, we will find a way. Silence wills the shrine, giving us the sign. Forever lost, forever in the dragon's den. On the sacred side, essence burning bright. Forever lost, forever in the dragon's den.
I'm glad you chose this track. As I mentioned, I thought it's wildly, wildly underrated. The melodic chorus is such an earworm on this track. It just kind of stuck with me all week. And it really kind of made me think about how much this band has changed. And what also kind of stood out was that little bass solo that happens during the instrumental section. Really just top-notch musicianship all around. Again, the word I'll use, and I keep coming back to it, is underrated. But a track that I don't think is underrated is Through the Looking Glass. This is the big epic tune on the album. It clocks in at over 13 minutes long. It's by far the longest track on the album. And for a long time, my absolute favorite track on the album. And I don't know that it's... Well, let's put it this way. Smoke and Mirrors really resonated with me, but Through the Looking Glass is my favorite track, and it's still my favorite track. I love that bass and keyboard tandem at the start. It almost makes you think it's going to be a ballad, but the song itself is really kind of this epic journey based on, the Alice in Wonderland and Lewis Carroll's novel Through the Looking Glass, and the sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And I say this because much like the Odyssey was this long journey on the album, the Odyssey, this was kind of this album's version of that. Shorter, of course, but this journey through the Looking Glass. And I think what I love about it are just the changes in pace and that majestic sound that seems to seep through for all 13 minutes. Some of the notes that Russell Allen holds on this track are phenomenal. Like, I can understand why they may not play this one live, because this has got to be a very tough song to play. I saw it live, but that was many, many, many moons ago. Every instrument is on point, and I gotta say, like, I don't know how this album functions without those keyboards, because those keyboards are just made for songs like this.
Should this have been the last song on the album?
I think there's an argument to be made there, because again, this is another one of those heavy hitters up front, because after this, although there's songs that I absolutely love, it takes a dip. Not a huge dip, because you're talking about a bunch of songs that were probably tens, and then you go to something that's less than a 10. So there's an argument to be made. But then by the same token, the song, the way this album starts off, it starts off perfect. I mean, like, literally perfect.
I would argue that In the Dragon's Den and Through the Looking Glass should have been the last two tracks, and The Relic, Orion the Hunter, and Lady of the Snow should have been in the middle. And I that's just me. I feel like that would flow better for me, because Through the Looking Glass, like you said, just has this epic feel to it that, like, it feels like a last song the way that, like, Candlelight Fantasia felt like a last song on Divine Wings, and Symphony X has a tendency to have really epic last songs. I mean, granted, Candlelight Fantasia was following the Divine Wings of Tragedy, the song, and they were like, well, we actually have a better choice for the last song on the album. Well, touche, Symphony X, touche. I mean, Lady of the Snow is also a pretty epic song, but I think that it doesn't quite compare to this Through the Looking Glass track that,
No, I'll just say it now, even though we're going out of order. I think Lady of the Snow is like a poor man's version of Through the Looking Glass. Good song, but just not as majestic or not as powerful as Through the Looking Glass. So you might be onto something.
Though that like kind of closing vocals towards the end of the song, where it just feels like such a majestic vocal line. And Symphony X at this time, during this era, their backing vocals on these tracks add so much to the songs. Like, I don't know if it's just, layered layered Russell Allen's, or if they actually had, like, people that doing their backing vocals, or if it was the members of the band, but it adds such a different layer. And this song has that on full display. But, this is just a 13-minute song that really, I think, features everyone in the band, but more in particular, the really strong songwriting that this band was doing at this time. And this is, going back to it, I was like, I kind of had forgotten that this wasn't the last track, because it just has last track vibes to me. And I would argue I would have found the album to be more cohesive if these two tracks we just discussed were pinned to the end, and you had In the Dragon's Den as like that last really heavy face melter type song, and also distancing it from Smoke and Mirrors a bit, because those two songs both have a lot of energy and just have, like, they lean more to the power metal side of Symphony X than the prog metal side, and then you finish it off with this really epic, triumphant song to finish. I don't know that it's going to detract from my score at all. I just think that it would be, I don't know, I feel like that would make for a better order. But, that being said, the song is fantastic. And honestly, I was fully expecting you to choose it as your song of the week. So interesting pivot.
I still will maintain it's the best song on the album, but this week, the other one I think hit me a little harder. As we move ahead to The Relic, which you mentioned earlier, a good song, but an impossible act to follow, and I think that it suffers as a result, at least a little bit. It has this really dark neoclassical vibe, very Castlevania inspired, and although I love the riff and the bass during the verses, and then it has this kind of creepy pre-chorus thing going on, the chorus itself is good, but kind of straightforward. It has a nice galloping quality. It reminds me a lot of The Eyes of Medusa from Divine Wings, one of those tracks that's just a little bit less than the others, but certainly not bad. And I'll even say that it's grown on me over the years. I might even like it more now than I used to, but it's just not as good as the tracks we've talked about so far.
I think I like this track a bit more than you do. If you're gonna not make Through the Looking Glass your last track and you need to follow it with something, I think of the last three songs, this was the right choice because I think it brings back that energy that we were getting in the Dragon's Den and Smoke and Mirrors. I agree, I don't think it's as good of a song as those two, but I think it's close. Like it's another one of those just super power metal, neoclassical power metal vibe type songs. I mean, Symphony X really does a hell of a job straddling the line between power and prog. Like Church of the Machine, I think definitely leans more prog, and so does Through the Looking Glass. But the Relic, I think, it's kind of like, hey, we're still doing the power metal over here. Check us out. So if we were to reorder the album, as I suggested earlier, and this song came up after, let's say we'll put Sonata in the Dragon's Den and Through the Looking Glass as the last three songs. Keep Sonata as the intro to In the Dragon's Den, so to speak. The Relic comes on after Church of the Machine. I think it fits well in that spot also. But catchy chorus. I really like this track, and I think that the one thing that this album I think has over Divine Wings, besides Smoke and Mirrors being the best song the band ever wrote, is that there's not a dud song. Like, whereas for I think for both of us, we had discussed that on Divine Wings, that the I think it was the Pharaoh. Yeah, was that was kind of like the big miss on that album. And I think I even said this would have been a 10 for me if this was a better track. If that was like the Relic instead of, I might have given Divine Wings a 10 if they replaced Pharaoh with the Relic. I mean, whatever. Nitpicking, I suppose.
Splitting hairs, but trying to be objective.
Yeah, but I think this is another really good song, and a song that, like, I recognized immediately as soon as I heard it. But if you had said to me like a week ago, do you remember the Relic from Symphony X? I would have no idea what you were talking about. Like, I just forgot about the song. Like, I don't think they actually say the Relic at any point in the song. So, I will also point out an interesting thing I saw on Wikipedia was that there were unfinished compositions during the recording of this album that ended up on New Mythology Suite, mostly on the final track, Rediscovery Part 2, The New Mythology. And Michael Romeo had done an interview and said about half of Rediscovery Part 2 is the song Twilight and Olympus, maybe a little more. So, like, there was supposed to be a self-titled track or whatever that just never made it, and later on ended up on that album. And it kind of makes sense because I feel like the albums still maintain the same kind of general style. So I thought I would throw that out there, little tidbit. But yeah, I think the Relic is probably one of the more forgotten about but underrated Symphony X tunes, and because I literally forgot it completely. Like, just again, like if you had said the Relic, I would have been like shrug. So.
Well, you talk about certain songs having that power metal vibe to it. I think Orion the Hunter is another one, just because of that riff. And you mentioned Mike Crea earlier. This is and has always been the Mike Crea song on this album. He, to this day, I think talks about this song, and the guitar riffs are just absolutely fantastic on this. The verses are solid. They have like this nice gait to them. What really stood out to me, though, is I always thought that the instrumental section felt kind of disjointed, but like as I went back and listened to it, I think I forgot that when you piece all those disconjointed parts together, it somehow works. And I never realized, or at least I don't think I realized until this week, just how proggy this song was. I had it in my mind as like a power metal song, and I guess it kind of is. But there's a real 70s prog rock vibe, especially with some of the keyboard patches that are used later on in the song. This is another one which I can understand why he likes. I think I like it now more than I used to like even back in the day. This one grew on me a lot this week.
I kind of forgot that like it goes into that kind of like, mid-tempo, almost like flowery kind of Symphony X vibe. Yeah. After it opens up with such a heavy riff. Just a very Michael Romeo, like heavy riff with those drums really beating along with it. It's a really like heavy, crunchy-ish intro. And then the song kind of like maintains a bit of a mid-tempo vibe to it. And as, mentioned earlier, like Symphony X, man, their mid-tempo songs are excellent. And there's a lot of good keyboard action on this one. This is a really good tune as well. I just think that, like, at least for me, the last two tracks are like my least favorite tracks on the album. And that's why I'm harping a bit on the track order. I mean, again, it's nitpicking, but this is another really solid song. So shout out to Mike if he's out there. We thought of you when we heard this, and it's I always remembered that opening riff, and just in my head, I guess I always assumed I remember the song as being just way heavier than it really is. But another good tune. I mean, they're batting pretty high on this album so far.
So you mentioned Lady of the Snow earlier, and I kind of mentioned how it was a poor man's Through the Looking Glass. What I will say about this final track is that it actually reminded me of two different bands at two different points in the song. As you listen to this track, did it remind you of anything, even if it was just for a few measures?
Maybe.
Okay.
Can I get a hint?
Before the song really starts getting going, I hear Ed Guy's Vainglory Opera.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of weird. I never noticed it. The verses are beautiful. They almost have like a Stradivarius, like Winter type of vibe, or something else that you'd hear on Fourth Dimension. Again, something else I never picked up on until this week. It was just an odd blend of styles for a prog tune. The instrumental section at the end is a little bit meh, not bad, just not that great. I thought it was a decent closer, but I thought that they could have definitely ended this differently and been well served for it. Not a bad song, but not their best song, and not even close. Probably one or two worst songs on the album.
Yeah, and I feel like it's kind of like unfair just because the album is so good, and I think it's also just, again, a matter of, misordering, I guess. But I gotta tell you, the weirdest thing that this song made me think of is, like, I don't know, a minute and 15 seconds in or so, and like that, like, kind of like the vocals just kind of like, I don't know, they just kind of like shoot out at you, and it reminded me of Flash by Queen from the Flash Gordon soundtrack. Like, like I wonder if there was any thought to that when they were making the song. The song itself apparently was inspired by the Japanese mythological figure Yuki Onna. And Michael Romeo had said the band was looking for a musical and lyrical theme to represent tonalities and scale ideas for a new song, and Tom Miller suggested the Lady of the Snow story, and so the music was written to reflect the lyrics. So interesting how this was more of like a lyrics first kind of track, and I think it's a good track. I think it's a very good song on an album full of great and excellent, and if not like greatest Symphony X songs of all time. So it's almost like just, I feel like it would have been probably appreciated more if it was tucked a little bit more in the middle of the album, because again, I think like you said, Through the Looking Glass, I think does a better job at doing a song in this style, but definitely not a song to be slept on. It's a really good tune, and I wouldn't be sad to hear it live. But I stand by what I said. By as much as I like every song on this album, the last two tracks are probably my least favorite songs on the album, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I'd be remiss not to talk about that remake of Masquerade, otherwise called Masquerade 98. Kind of a bonus track here on certain versions of the album. The original song Masquerade came out in 1994 on their self-titled album. I also am woefully ignorant when it comes to that album. I have to go back and listen to that. It's been probably 30 years, or not 30, but like 25 years since I've listened to it. It's been a long time. Say that to say, Masquerade 98 it puts Russell Allen's vocals on top of this old track that they re-recorded, a song that would make Yngwie Malmsteen proud, if for no other reason than the neoclassical guitars are plentiful on this particular song. The song is fine. I would never say that I loved it. I do like the tonality of the drums. They're very high up in the mix. And it's cool to hear Russell Allen sing on this track, but I wouldn't say it's his best performance. And I think this song suffers a little bit from some abrupt transitions. It's a classic example of like the individual parts being greater than the sum of the parts together. But I know I'm being maybe a little bit unduly harsh, but it just, it shows off a little bit of the band's immaturity in their songwriting, because it does go back to that debut album.
If you go back and listen to the original, like just like tonally and audibly, or just sound quality wise, production wise, this like just blows that original track out of the water. It's like a garage recording versus, a professional, like a very professionally done track. This was recorded initially for the Prelude to the Millennium album. It was a greatest hits album that I think was only released in Japan, if I'm remembering correctly. And it came out after Twilight and Olympus was released. Like, imagine you're a band, you're like, we have 4 albums, it's time for the greatest hits album. I always thought that was kind of funny. And plus, like, if you look at the track listing of that compilation, it's like they managed to cram Divine Wings of Tragedy and Through the Looking Glass on this thing. In fact, I think they may have. Oh yeah, no, A Winter's Dream. I think they only used like part 2 of it because they ran out of space. Because they put 2 pretty massive songs on here. But I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that they didn't belong on a Symphony X Greatest Hits album. Just maybe needed to be a double disc situation. Even at that point when there was only 4 songs. But I guess rather than put a track from an album that had a different singer or whatever, they were like, let's re-record Masquerade. And I really like this track. I really like this version of it. It's just another one of those like fast-paced Symphony X songs that you can really tap your foot to, and it has like a very symphonic, almost a chaotic symphonic intro to it. I believe it was released also as a bonus track on the Odyssey down the line. And then I think when Twilight and Olympus was re-released or reissued, they tacked it onto copy versions of that as well. But being that it was recorded the same year and presumably at the same session, I don't know for sure, but I figured it was worth mentioning just to be a completist. But it'll be an interesting discussion to go back and talk about this first Symphony X album, because if you think there's a big jump from Damnation Game to Divine Wings, the jump from the self-titled album to Damnation Game is wildly that. I always put this in with like the first two Camelot albums also as just albums that sounded so different that I just couldn't listen to them. So maybe at some point we can tackle those and see how we feel. I was very wrong about the first 2 Royal Hunt albums. When I finally sat down and listened to those, I realized that those were 2 of the band's best albums. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case with Symphony X and Camelot, but I'm sure at some point in the future we will get there.
So I'm going to ask the question that everyone has on their minds, which is, with the benefit of hindsight and really getting to kind of dive deep into this album this week, not only where does it rank in terms of your score 1 to 10, but is it better than Divine Wings because it's more consistent throughout? I'm curious if you're going to give it a better score than the classic Divine Wings or the New Mythology Suite.
Well, I gave Divine Wings a 9.75, so it doesn't get much higher than that. And I gave New Mythology Suite a 9, I believe, and you did as well. I think that this falls somewhere in between. I think that something about Divine Wings on a whole, I think there's something about it. I don't know if it was like just because it was the first Symphony X album that I really got excited about. I don't know how else to put it. And I think that like the the last two tracks on Twilight and Olympus, while not like, Pharaoh, which keeps Divine Wings from a 10 to like dropping it down to a 9.75. They're not that bad, but they're also like not perfect. And I think that if those last two tracks were in the realm of the rest of the album, for me, I think it would be closer to a 10. I think I'm struggling on where to land on this one. I think I'm just going to go with a 9.375. Like it's up there, but I just don't know that on the whole, I love it quite as much as Divine Wings, even though Divine Wings does have that one little, song that I don't love, but it's still, I think I do like it more than New Mythology Suite on the whole. So I'm going to rank it a little bit higher than that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at. I was like honestly bouncing all over between 9 and 9.5. So I might as well just go right in between, or a little bit skewing a little bit higher, but I think it's deserved.
I can't argue it's splitting hairs in many ways. I'm going to give it an 8.75. I do like the New Mythology Suite better. It is not a perfect album, but it is an all-time classic. And anything else we cover by this band will really be a true testament to the strength of that particular album, or whatever, because these are the three classics and everything else is not a classic in the true sense of the word in my mind. So that's a discussion for another day and another time. But that is Twilight and Olympus, and I'm really glad you covered it. I was excited to go back and listen to it, so an excellent choice. I want to briefly talk about one news item this week, though, that broke today, and I just wanted to kind of cement your thoughts, and that is Matt Cameron leaving Pearl Jam after 27 years as their drummer. This has to come as a shock for you as someone who's followed this band essentially since their inception.
Yeah, this was really unexpected. I had said to you earlier that I kind of was expecting like this lineup of Pearl Jam to pretty much ride out into the sunset. I thought that was really going to be, this is it. I mean, the band has been the same since 1998 when Matt Cameron joined after the end of Soundgarden. And so it was shocking. I mean, I had just seen the guy drum for the band, last month or 2 months ago. So yeah, I have to think that, I'm hoping that it's not health related. I have to think that maybe it's just when you're 62 or 63 years old, maybe going out on tour and drumming every night is a little hard. It's a little hard on the body, maybe he just was like ready to call it quits. Just ready to retire. I'm sure he has made plenty of money. So, and based on the press releases that both him and the band put out, it definitely sounds like the split was amicable. I just don't know. I just can't picture who would take his place at this point. If it would be somebody from the past or somebody new, maybe somebody younger. I have no idea. But the band's not really touring quite to the extent that they had been in the past. So I don't know. It's interesting. I hope it's not like the beginning of the end for the band. I somehow doubt that it is, but and again, I also especially hope that it is not like, health related. Like, I think of when Neil Peart, decided that he was going to retire from drumming. Little did we know it was more than that, and he wasn't, with us for too much longer. Hopefully it's not to that level of direness, but it was very shocking to wake up and read that of all things today. So many thanks to Matt Cameron. I mean, he literally was the drummer for every Pearl Jam show I've ever attended. And, around the time that I was really getting serious about being a fan of the band was when he joined, I think right after Yield was released. So, as a huge fan of the band, I'm glad you brought that up, and it'll be interesting to see where things go from here with the band, because this is a long time member of the band. Like I said, he's been in the band for 27 years. So
it's wild, but obviously they will continue to pick up the pieces, and I'm sure they'll be out on the road before long, because that's just what they do. As to who is behind the drum kit, that is a question that will be answered in the weeks and months ahead, I'm sure.
It's a funny thing about that band, too, is because everyone in the band has been the same for the entire duration of the band, but the drummer has changed numerous times. And I thought, like, with Matt Cameron, they finally found, like, their ride or die drummer. But, life happens and things happen, and, hey, if I was like 62 and I could retire, I sure as hell would make that choice to do so. So I'm sure, God bless indeed, and it makes me think that we're definitely due to cover a Soundgarden album one of these days too.
Yes, that is true. Although it will not be next week, because you had asked me earlier this week, or even earlier today, when I had mentioned in passing that I had an album picked out for next week, and said, is it going to, just in terms of scheduling, to kind of give you a bit of insight as to what I was going to choose, not the name of the album, but just in terms of like, did I need 2 weeks in a row to do a Metal Exchange double? And the answer is no, I definitely don't need 2 weeks in a row to do a Metal Exchange double, but that doesn't mean we're not doing a Metal Exchange double. And the reason for that is Symphony X's Underworld came out 10 years ago, July 24th of 2015. So we've done the 3 quote-unquote classic Symphony X albums. Now we're going to do their newest release, which came out now a decade ago. I thought the timing was right to do some modern Symphony X. I had the pleasure of listening to this album earlier today, and it's much better than I remembered it. I had no love of this album at all when it came out. I think it's a little unbalanced after the first listen. I think there's some songs that are phenomenal, and there's other songs that are like, they're okay. But I am looking forward to doing a deep dive into Symphony X's Underworld. A, because I think they're going to play some of it in Atlanta. B, because we're going to be coming up with our Dream Symphony X set list for our Patreon members. And C, it's a 10th anniversary, and I think that it's a good time to cover some new Symphony X, something we have not done on the podcast.
It's crazy to think that the newest Symphony X album is 10 years old, but here we are. I did not see that coming, so that is a very cool choice, and I think will make for a good comparison to this week's episode. So very good. I have my album for the following week set in stone, which is kind of why I was asking you about if you were picking 2 or not. So that will remain. So yeah, that's awesome, and this is definitely an album that, at least according to my records, I listened to quite a bit when it was released. Probably more so than any new Symphony X album since the Odyssey, I would say. So but as I look at the track list, it's like Nevermore is like the one song I really remember, and I don't really remember like the rest of the songs. It's kind of like The Relic, but an whole album full of The Relic. So this will be a good way to kind of reacquaint myself with this one. So very nice. I look forward to talking about this one with you. So more Symphony X, gotta love it.
Nice. I'm glad you enjoy. It's going to definitely be an interesting conversation. A shout out to all of our Patreon members. Thank you, thank you, thank you to everybody else that's new. Consider joining our Patreon, and as always, give us a like and a follow if you like what you hear, and we will come and keep bringing you album after album each and every week at the Metal Exchange. Chris, this has been a really good choice, and I look forward to talking about some more Symphony X when you're back from your vacation.
Me as well. Very nice. I was like typing it in the spreadsheet, and like Underworld came up, and I was like, did we do this already? Nope, that was Adagio's Underworld. So this will be our second Underworld episode. So for those keeping track for whatever reason why you would be, I have no idea, but it's our second Underworld episode in as many years or decades. I don't know. I'm just babbling at this point. So maybe it's a good time to sign off, and we'll be back next week with some more Symphony X.